Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Home prices up 20% in July. We talked yesterday about CoreLogic, the equity increases in homes year over year in Q2. The average on a state-by-state basis, $51,500. Of course, Illinois, half that. The password, property taxes. And California, almost 5 times Illinois, $114,000, $116,000 average home equity increase year over year in Q2. But rising home prices and diminishing supply, which is in part why home prices are rising precipitously in much of America, including some of the more wealthy areas of America, which includes a lot of big urban centers in America. Although, you also have flight from those big centers, so that's a little bit middled. But, of course, that brings the renewed calls for the federal government and state and local governments to get more involved in housing, rental assistance, new affordable housing, right? This has been a watch phrase of the government-centric for a couple of generations now. But is that the right play? The federal rental assistance and the subsidized housing at the state and city levels. Is that the way to address the homeless encampments we see in Chicago and in big cities all across America?
If any of you don't know if it's a problem, just drive north of Irving Park on Lakeshore Drive. They are taking over the lakefront. Mm-hmm. And under every viaduct, it's everywhere.
Oh, well, so there's understanding of the homeless situation. There's also understanding the housing market and sensible policies and the intersection of the two. And for a conversation about that and a couple other matters, too, Howard Husak joins us. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. He's also the author of the new book, The Poor Side of Town and Why We Need It. Howard, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Dan and Amy. Glad to be with you.
So, first on just the matter of homelessness, I mean, this factored into the debate during the run-up to Gavin Newsom's recall vote just a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, he survived, but there were a lot of people upset about what San Francisco and Santa Monica and Venice and L.A. have become. And, of course, we see that, as I said, in big cities throughout America, this seeming increase in homelessness because it's just more public and it's more centralized in, like, commercial districts. And so it's bothering people, particularly people that paid a lot of money to live in places like San Francisco and Venice and Santa Monica. But it doesn't mean that we're necessarily understanding root causes or doing anything to address them any better than we were previously.
That is absolutely for sure. And this very term homelessness, when I talk in my book about the poor side of town, I'm not talking about let's have homeless encampments in Irving Park. By the way, my wife's from Chicago. I can picture every place you're talking about.
Good.
And the homeless situation has been distorted in our conversation because it implies that a lack of a house is the homeless person's biggest problem. If you look at the data from groups like the Treatment Advocacy Center in Washington area, a huge proportion of these poor souls, and we have to feel for them, have suffered from severe mental illness and substance abuse problems. Now, I'm not talking about the families that are priced out of having a big enough apartment, and some people want to call them homeless. No, they have a roof over their heads. That's not the same thing as the guy on the street in a tent. I was just in Washington. There are guys with tents and bicycles. They're all set up. That's their house.
Right.
So these are people that need treatment, and we have given up. It used to be every state had large mental health treatment centers, psychiatric hospitals. Some of them were better than others, but rather than improving them, we gave up on them. We had this illusion that people were going to have halfway houses, they were going to get treatment in the community, and we see the result. in people on the street who desperately need treatment. They're suffering from schizophrenia, from clinical depression. We are an uncompassionate society by leaving them there to suffer.
So on the other issue, though, the affordable housing play, which is to deal with people that are not necessarily substance abusers and not necessarily
Whole different population.
yeah, right. It meant, but I mean, and you have the zeitgeist behind this coming from the left. Includes in wealthy communities. I mean, we've seen it here in on the North Shore of Chicago, where there have been pushes that have been rebuffed, but pushes nonetheless for affordable housing in places like Lake Forest, which is one of the wealthiest, and Winnetka, some of the wealthiest communities in Illinois.
Right.
And so address and of course mayors, big city mayors, and blue state governors like to talk about affordable housing as well. So address that catchphrase that they use so routinely.
Well, we have had failed quote-unquote affordable housing projects going back to the Franklin Roosevelt administration. Public housing projects were the affordable housing of their day, and there have been generations after generations of subsidized housing, all of which starts off being nice and new and shiny and then deteriorates because it lacks the ownership. It lacks the key aspects of moving to Winnetka or Lake Forest or Oak Park or any of the, even to Cicero. You have to strive and save in order to be ready for home ownership to get there. And if suddenly you have a subsidized rental apartment, it's an entirely different matter. What we need instead, and this is the argument of my book, The Poor Side of Town, we know how to do affordable housing. The government doesn't know how to do it. It costs the government $400,000 a unit in California to build affordable housing,
Wow.
low-cost housing.
Right.
It's unbelievable. We know how to do it. We used to do it. It's the two families on the south side of Chicago. It's the three families in New England. It's the row houses in Philadelphia. Small homes on small lots that are owned by the people that live there. We know how to do this, and we have made it illegal and impossible to do. And so local planning boards have to reflect, can we loosen our zoning just a little bit? That's much better than saying we're going to have government subsidized housing, which is bad for communities and bad for the people who are being subsidized.
Well, in your book, The Poor Side of Town, do you talk about, the genesis of public housing and how it was started, to help mothers and kids whose fathers were, the theater of war in World War I?
It was started to
them.
make billionaires out of guys that live in Glencoe. That's how it actually worked out in Chicago.
Well, that is certainly true. There was always a nexus between developers and liberals who thought that they thought the market would fail. I'm not making this up. The people in the New Deal who wrote the public housing legislation truly believed that the private market was going to fail 2/3 of the American public, and government would have to step in like a public utility and provide housing for the majority of Americans. Instead, what they actually did in Chicago is among the worst examples in the country. Leveled, functioning black communities like Bronzeville, where there were high degrees of property ownership, business ownership by African Americans. They got minimal compensation. They lost their property. They were moved into the Robert Taylor homes, the Ida B. Wells homes, where they couldn't own anything. The government owned it all.
Yeah.
And so now we're surprised that black people have accumulated less wealth. We conspired to deny them the opportunity to accumulate wealth, and that was the Progressives Project.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yes, absolutely spot on. And we've talked about this in this show too, because this is a particularly interesting and issue that animates me too. And the other thing you've seen, you go back and look at the Tribune coverage in the 60s about this, pushing people who had lived in subsidized housing out to the suburbs. This is in part what destroyed the South Suburban Cook County. And if you go back and look, Roseland on the south side of the city, was a thriving community, had a lot of middle income black families. And when the city wanted to start pushing black families who lived in subsidized housing out to Roseland, the black families in Roseland said, no, we don't want that. And it's not because of them. It's because they don't know how to do home ownership because they've never had the opportunity. So they're going to come here and they're going to be a burden on us and they're going to change the character of our community. This is black talking about black And that's exactly what happened in Roseland. It was decimating.
And that's true in the South suburban, freestanding suburban communities in the South Shore of Chicago. And it doesn't mean that those who were transplanted there don't have the potential to become thriving citizens.
No,
of course they do.
Of course.
Right? But the incentive structure was all wrong. You get to live here. Aren't you happy? Aren't we doing you a favor? As opposed to, we're going to strive, we're going to save our money, we're going to be a two-earner family, and we're going to earn our way to Rosedale. We're going to earn our way to Winnetka, And that was aborted. That whole process of upward mobility, especially for the African American community, was aborted. And it was to their detriment to this day.
When they raised all those high rises too and said, no, we need to put people in townhomes because it's safer.
Well,
which was very interesting because they tore down Robert Taylor homes, and a lot of people went out to Carpentersville where they bought townhomes next to each other because they thought high rises created more crime. Which was crazy.
They took their vouchers, they pushed them out. I mean, Carpentersville, but they really pushed them out disproportionately to South Suburban Cook County,
That's correct.
which just destroyed that combined with the property taxes and business leaving. It just makes South Suburban Cook County a demilitarized zone. Absolutely destroyed by terrible public policy. It's not terrible people, terrible public policy.
Right, and getting a rental voucher. I mean, I'm not one of these guys who wants to do reparations like they're doing in Evanston, I happen to know. But I could almost be persuaded that people who lived for 30 years in the Robert Taylor homes should have been compensated for having no chance to accumulate wealth through ownership. And then maybe they would have moved to South Suburban Chicago and bought a place and paid taxes and had a mortgage the way the other residents did. They would have. That's how we make communities, when people have a socioeconomic commonality. And when you put the poorest people in with people who have, in their understanding of themselves, worked their hardest to climb the ladder, and that includes African Americans, they say, wait a minute, this is not what I bargained for.
Was it a portion of their salary, or how did they charge them rent? Was it a portion of their salary, or was it a set rate?
Yeah, well, and this is still true today. Amy, you have hit on one of the points in my book, and something that really outrages me. The government gives you a great favor if you live in subsidized housing of any kind, whether it's those replacement row houses or the replacement housing for Cabrini Green or any of them. You get to pay only 30% of your income in rent. Boy, that sounds like a great deal. Would you sign a lease like that? Because that means as your income increases, guess what? Your rent goes up.
Right.
Who in the world would sign a lease like that? But that's what we do for poor people in this country who live in this benevolent, subsidized housing universe.
Yeah, they're serfs, and that's fitting because Chicago's a feudal system. But with respect to you said something earlier about need to stop making it illegal. Need to do some legal changes in addition to these terrible public housing policies that we're describing. What local communities should do to be more open and need to do to be more open to those starter homes, to give people their footing, and then they build wealth and then they move on and move up. So talk a little bit more about those policies that inhibit that sort of upward mobility.
Well, as you go out to ex-urban areas, you've got 2-acre zoning. And you can only build one house on a huge area. That is, you can't build a lot of housing that way. What I want to urge, and this is up to every local planning board in the country, and there's tens of thousands of them, think about the next generation and their need for starter homes. Think about your children who grew up, not necessarily in Glencoe, but in more modest communities, and they can't afford to stay anymore. I mean, if they want to stay in Illinois, that's a whole other conversation, of course.
Yes. Right.
But assuming they want to stay in the community where they grew up, they may be priced out of the market. Think about having, I exaggerate a little with the poor side of town, but a poorer side of town, a lower cost side of town, where you can get a foothold, as you put it, Dan, and you can stay in the community where you grew up. And guess what? Those people are the next generation of buyers for those who want to sell when they get older. So we have cut all the rungs off our housing ladder, and we've left people to try to leap up to the highest rung, and they don't have that lower rung to start on. And that's something every community could do, and we don't need Washington intervening to tell them how to do it.
Interesting. Howard Husak, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, the new book, The Poor Side of Town and Why We Need It. Howard, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Dan and Amy.
Yeah, thank you. It was very insightful. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM